Have you ever felt a spark with a woman and wondered if she's feeling it too, but couldn't quite tell? Today, I'm going to reveal the 3 subtle signs she's already feeling desire. And trust me, the third one happens right under most men's noses, and almost nobody notices it in time. Hello, and welcome back. I'm Mary Smith, host of the Mindful Senior Living YouTube channel. Let me tell you, many men feel but struggle to understand the quiet, almost invisible signals that a woman gives when desire has already begun to grow. Before we dive into these signs, there is something deeply important I want you to understand. If you've ever found yourself replaying a conversation in your head, wondering whether a woman liked you or not, if you've ever walked away from a moment later realizing you might have missed something, that doesn't mean you're clueless, awkward, or lacking confidence. It simply means no one ever taught you how to recognize the language of female desire. And that language is very different from the one most men are used to. You see, men and women tend to experience attraction in very different ways. For many men, attraction feels direct. You notice someone, you feel drawn to them, and you want to move toward that feeling quickly. But for many women, attraction unfolds more slowly and more subtly. It's not a sudden charge forward. It's more like opening small doors one at a time and waiting to see who notices them. Women often test the emotional atmosphere first. They observe. They create moments. They look for safety, curiosity, and mutual interest before allowing desire to move forward. And if you're watching closely, you'll notice something fascinating. Women rarely shout their interest. They whisper it. Those whispers appear in body language, small behaviors, eye contact, tone of voice, and the way a woman positions herself around you. They appear in moments so subtle that if you blink, you might miss them. But once you understand what you're looking for, something incredible happens. Suddenly, you begin to see patterns. Situations that once felt confusing start to make sense. Moments that once slipped past, you begin to stand out clearly. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. But before we continue, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever looked back at a moment from years ago and suddenly realized she might have liked you? Maybe it was a coworker who always found reasons to talk to you. Maybe it was someone at a gathering who seemed to linger near you longer than necessary. Maybe it was a woman who laughed at your jokes just a little more than everyone else. At the time, you brushed it off. You assumed she was just being friendly, but later you wondered if that has ever happened to you. I want you to know you're not alone. It happens to millions of men, and the reason isn't lack of intelligence or awareness. It's simply that most men were never taught how to read these signals. So today, we're going to slow down and look closely at 3 of the clearest whispers of female desire. These are not dramatic gestures. They're not bold declarations. They are quiet signals that reveal when attraction has already begun. And when you start noticing them, your entire understanding of social interaction can change. Now, if you're enjoying this conversation already, take a moment to tap the like button. It helps more people discover these discussions, and it allows this channel to keep sharing thoughtful, meaningful insights about relationships and human psychology. All right, let's begin with the first signal. The first sign a woman may already feel desire is something incredibly simple, yet incredibly powerful. Touch. But not just any touch. I'm talking about those moments when a woman touches you for no obvious reason. This isn't the accidental brush of hands. It's not a quick pat on the shoulder like someone might give a coworker. It's something slightly different. It's intentional, even if she doesn't consciously realize she's doing it. In neuroscience, this is sometimes referred to as initiating contact. When attraction activates in the brain, the body often seeks subtle ways to close physical distance. Touch becomes a bridge. Imagine this situation. You're standing in conversation with a woman. You're both laughing about something. As she responds, she lightly touches your arm for a moment. Then she leaves her hand there just a second longer than necessary. Not long enough to feel dramatic, just long enough that your brain notices. That tiny pause matters more than you might think because that extra second often reflects comfort. Comfort is one of the earliest foundations of attraction. When someone feels uneasy around you, their body tends to maintain distance. Their gestures remain contained. Their movements stay guarded. But when a woman feels curiosity, when she feels warmth, when attraction begins to stir, the body often relaxes its boundaries and touch begins to appear. Sometimes it's subtle. She might adjust your collar jokingly. She might tap your arm while laughing. She might guide you slightly while walking through a crowd. None of these actions scream desire, but together they form a pattern. Let me share a story that illustrates this beautifully. A man once told me about a moment at a friend's birthday gathering. He had been talking with a woman he had just met, and the conversation flowed naturally. They joked about music, shared stories about travel, and laughed easily. At one point, she reached out and brushed something invisible off his sleeve. He assumed it was just politeness. Later during the conversation, she touched his arm again while laughing, then again when making a point. Each moment lasted only a second. He barely thought about it. Months later, they reconnected through mutual friends. During a conversation about that first meeting, she confessed something surprising. She said, "I kept touching your arm because I was trying to see if you felt the connection too." He had missed every signal. And this happens more often than you might imagine because most men are trained to notice loud signals, but attraction is often quiet. Now, here's something fascinating from psychological research. Studies on interpersonal attraction show that people who feel romantic interest often mirror physical closeness behaviors. They lean slightly closer. They orient their bodies toward the person they're interested in. And yes, they initiate small touches. These gestures are rarely calculated. They emerge naturally when the brain releases certain chemicals associated with bonding and attraction. Oxytocin, for example, is sometimes called the bonding hormone. It increases feelings of trust and connection, and physical touch can stimulate its release. So, when a woman lightly touches your arm or shoulder during conversation, she may not consciously realize what she's doing. Her body simply feels comfortable, and comfort is often the doorway to desire. Now, here's an important point I want you to remember. One isolated gesture doesn't necessarily mean attraction, but patterns tell stories. If a woman repeatedly finds reasons to touch you during a conversation, that's often a sign that she enjoys your presence and feels drawn toward you. And if you've ever experienced that before, I want you to do something interesting. Write the word touch in the comments. Not because it helps the algorithm, although it does, but because it helps you pause and reflect on your own experiences. Sometimes the most powerful insight begins with awareness, and awareness changes how we see the world. Now, let's move into the second signal, because this one is even more powerful and far more revealing. It lives in her eyes. The eyes reveal things words often hide. You've probably heard the phrase that the eyes are the window to the soul. While that may sound poetic, psychology tells us that there is actually a great deal of truth behind it. Human beings communicate enormous amounts of emotional information through eye contact, interest, curiosity, discomfort, attraction, trust. Our eyes often reveal these feelings long before our words do. When a woman begins to feel desire, something subtle shifts in the way she looks at you. It's not simply that she looks at you more often, it's the quality of the gaze. Many men assume that attraction means constant staring, but that's not how it usually appears. In fact, attraction often looks like a rhythm. She looks at you. She holds your gaze for a moment longer than expected. Then she glances downward or away. And a few seconds later, she looks back again. That small cycle, look, soften, glance away, return, is one of the quietest signals of growing attraction. What makes this fascinating is that much of it happens automatically. When someone feels genuine interest or desire, the body reacts in ways that cannot easily be controlled. One of those reactions involves the pupils. Research in social psychology has shown that when we look at something or someone we find attractive, our pupils naturally dilate. It's an involuntary response controlled by the nervous system. In simple terms, the brain recognizes something it likes, and the body opens up slightly in response. Of course, you shouldn't stare into someone's eyes trying to measure pupil size. That's not the point. The real signal is the feeling behind the gaze. When a woman feels drawn to you, her eyes often soften. The intensity changes. Instead of quick, polite eye contact that people use in everyday interactions, her gaze becomes warmer and more present. Let me describe a moment that many people have experienced without realizing its significance. You're sitting across from a woman during a conversation. Maybe you're sharing a story or talking about something meaningful. As you speak, she looks directly at you with a gentle focus. She smiles slightly, then almost shyly, she glances downward. A moment passes, then she looks back at you again. That pattern repeats throughout the conversation. It feels natural, comfortable, almost magnetic. That is often the quiet language of attraction. Nonverbal communication experts have studied this pattern for decades. It's sometimes referred to as the triangle, gaze in social interaction, where attention moves between the eyes, the mouth, and back again. But in romantic attraction, something else appears. Softness, warmth, a sense that she isn't just hearing your words, she's feeling the moment with you. And here's something important many people overlook. When a woman feels attraction, she often listens more closely than usual. Her attention sharpens. She remembers small details. You mentioned she reacts emotionally to your stories. This isn't just politeness, it's genuine investment in you. That attentive gaze isn't just politeness, it's engagement. It means you're holding her attention in a way few others do. Let me share a simple, real-life example. A man once described a moment during a casual dinner with friends. Across the table sat a woman he had only recently met. Throughout the evening, conversations moved between different people. Laughter filled the room, and everyone seemed relaxed, but every time he spoke, he noticed something subtle. She turned slightly toward him. Her attention focused directly on him, and whenever their eyes met, she smiled, then looked down briefly before meeting his gaze again. He later told me something interesting. He said the room was full of people, yet somehow the conversation between them felt strangely personal, almost like the world had grown quieter around them. That feeling happens more often than people realize. It's the power of focused attention. When someone looks at you in that way, they are signaling something important. They are saying without words, "You have my attention." And attention is the beginning of attraction. Now, here's a small exercise I want you to try. The next time you're in a social setting, instead of focusing only on what you're saying, observe how people respond to you. Notice eye contact. Notice who returns your gaze quickly and who lets it linger. Notice who glances back at you across the room more than once. Human beings are constantly communicating through these tiny signals. Once you begin paying attention to them, social interactions become much easier to understand. And if you're finding this conversation helpful so far, take a moment to tap the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps these discussions reach people who may truly benefit from understanding human behavior and relationships more deeply. Now, we're about to move into the third signal, and this one is the most powerful music of all, because while touch and eye contact can happen casually in many situations, this third signal almost always requires intention. It involves something that most men completely overlook, a shift in space. And when you recognize it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Because when a woman feels desire beginning to grow, she often does something very specific. She creates privacy where there wasn't any before. Think about how most social situations work. At a party, people move in groups. At a restaurant, conversations happen across tables. In workplaces, discussions often include multiple people at once. Social environments naturally create shared space. But when a woman begins to feel genuine attraction towards someone, something interesting can happen. She may start looking for ways to step slightly outside that shared space. Not dramatically, not in a way that draws attention, just enough to create a moment that belongs only to the two of you. This is the third signal most men miss completely. She creates privacy where there wasn't any before. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean pulling you into a separate room or making a grand gesture. In reality, it's usually far more subtle than that. Imagine you're standing in a group conversation. Everyone is chatting casually, and suddenly she turns toward you and says something like, "Come here for a second. I want to show you something." Maybe she points out something across the room. Maybe she suggests grabbing a drink together from the bar. Maybe she lowers her voice slightly and shares a comment meant only for you. These small shifts might seem insignificant, but psychologically, they carry meaning. When someone feels attracted, they often begin to create what researchers call micro-environments, small spaces where deeper interaction can happen without the pressure of a group watching. These moments allow curiosity and connection to grow more naturally. For many women especially, emotional comfort plays a huge role in attraction. Creating a small pocket of privacy allows her to observe you more closely. It gives her a chance to see how you respond when the interaction becomes more personal. Do you remain present? Do you maintain eye contact? Do you respond with warmth and confidence? These moments act almost like a gentle test, though not in the competitive way many people imagine. It's more like an invitation, a quiet way of saying, "Let's see what happens if we step slightly closer." Let me tell you about a situation that illustrates this perfectly. A man once described attending a friend's engagement party. There were maybe 30 people in the room, music playing softly, everyone talking and celebrating. Throughout the evening, he had several light conversations with a woman he had just met. Nothing dramatic, just laughter and casual banter. Then at one point, she said something interesting. She leaned toward him slightly and said, "Hey, come see this photo album. My friend just put it on the side table." The album wasn't particularly exciting. It was just pictures from a vacation. But something important happened in that moment. When they stepped away from the group and stood together by the table, the energy shifted. The conversation became more relaxed, more personal. They talked longer than either of them expected. Later, he realized that the album wasn't the point. The moment was, she had simply created an opportunity for a private interaction. And these moments happen constantly in social life. Sometimes it's suggesting a short walk outside. Sometimes it's asking your opinion about something away from the crowd. Sometimes it's lowering her voice and leaning slightly closer when speaking. Each of these actions quietly reduces the distance between two people. And when attraction is present, that distance tends to shrink gradually over time. Now, here's the key point many people miss. When a woman creates that small pocket of privacy, she is watching your response not to judge you, but to see whether you recognize the moment. Do you lean into the conversation? Do you become more attentive? Do you stay relaxed and confident? Or do you panic, overthink, and rush the interaction? Attraction grows best when both people remain comfortable in the moment. One of the most attractive qualities a person can display is calm presence. The ability to enjoy the interaction without forcing it forward. That's why awareness is so powerful. When you begin recognizing these signals, touch, eye contact, and moments of privacy, you no longer feel confused about what's happening. You simply respond with presence. You stay engaged. You allow the interaction to unfold naturally. And something beautiful often happens when two people meet each other in that space. Now, I want to pause here for a moment and ask you something. Have you ever experienced a moment like this? Maybe someone invited you to step aside for a conversation. Maybe someone lowered their voice and shared something quietly with you. Maybe someone suggested grabbing coffee or walking somewhere together even though others were around. If that has ever happened to you, there's a good chance you are witnessing this third signal. And once you begin noticing it, you'll realize how common it actually is. Now, before we wrap up, There's one more insight I want to leave you with because understanding these signals is not about manipulating people. It's about awareness. Human relationships become much easier when we learn to recognize the natural ways people express interest. You don't have to guess. You don't have to force anything. You simply observe, respond, and remain present. And if you're enjoying this conversation so far, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Here on Mindful Senior Living, we explore psychology, relationships, emotional intelligence, and the deeper patterns that shape our connections with others. Now let's bring everything together. Because once you understand these three signals, something interesting happens. You start noticing opportunities that once passed you by. And that awareness can quietly transform the way you experience connection. Now that we've explored these three subtle signals, touch, eye contact, and the creation of private moments, let's pause. None of these signals are loud. None of them are dramatic declarations, and that's exactly why so many people miss them. Human attraction rarely begins with fireworks. Most of the time, it starts with quiet curiosity, a small gesture, a lingering look, a moment where two people feel slightly more aware of each other than they do of everyone else. These moments are easy to overlook when you're distracted, nervous, or focused only on what you should say next. But when you begin observing more carefully, a completely different picture emerges. You start to notice that attraction is actually happening all around you, in the way someone leans closer during a conversation, in the way someone laughs just a little longer, in the way someone looks at you across the room and then quickly looks away when you catch them. These are the whispers of human connection. And once you start hearing them, your entire experience changes. Let me share a thought that many people find surprising. Confidence in relationships rarely comes from saying the perfect thing. It comes from awareness. When you understand what's happening around you, you stop feeling like you're guessing. Instead, you simply respond naturally to the energy that already exists between two people. And that shift, moving from guessing to understanding, is incredibly powerful. But there's another layer to this conversation because recognizing signals is only part of the story. The real magic is in how you respond. When a woman lightly touches your arm, the goal is not to analyze it like a detective. It's simply to remain present in the moment. When she holds eye contact, you don't need a rehearsed line. You just meet her gaze, smile back, and continue the conversation naturally. When she creates a small moment of privacy, you don't rush. You simply enjoy the moment. Simplicity is often the secret. People are most attractive when they are relaxed, attentive, and genuinely engaged, not when they are performing. Think about the most enjoyable conversations you've ever had. Chances are they didn't feel forced. They flowed naturally. Both people felt comfortable being themselves. That sense of ease is one of the most powerful ingredients in attraction. Now, here's something I often remind people of. Attraction is not something you chase. It's something you recognize and nurture when it appears. And that's why awareness matters so much. When you begin noticing these subtle signals, you stop feeling like you're trying to create something from nothing. Instead, you simply recognize when interest is already there. You're no longer trying to impress. You're simply connecting. And connection, when it's genuine, tends to grow naturally. Let me tell you a brief story that captures this beautifully. A man once told me that for years he believed he was terrible at reading women. He assumed attraction was something mysterious that only charismatic people understood. But one evening, something different happened. He struck up a conversation with a woman sitting nearby while waiting for his coffee. The conversation was simple, nothing extraordinary. But as they talked, he noticed something he had never paid attention to before. She touched his arm lightly while laughing. She held eye contact and smiled warmly. After a few minutes, she said, "Hey, do you want to sit over here? It's a little quieter." Without realizing it, she had displayed all three signals we discussed today. For the first time in his life, he recognized them, and instead of overthinking, he simply stayed present. He enjoyed the moment. They talked for nearly an hour. Later, he told me something that stuck with me. He said, "For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trying to make something happen. I just noticed what was already happening." That is the real power of understanding human behavior. It replaces confusion with clarity, and clarity brings calm confidence. Now, before we finish, I want to leave you with a small challenge. The next time you're in a social setting, whether it's a gathering, a coffee shop, or even work, try observing more than you usually do. Notice the small things. Notice who turns toward you. Notice who maintains eye contact a little longer. Notice who finds reasons to continue the conversation. You may be surprised by how much information people communicate without saying a single word. And if today's discussion helped you, take a moment to support the channel. Tap the like button, subscribe to Mindful Senior Living, and turn on the notification bell. And I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, write the word whispers if this video helped you recognize these subtle signals. It's a way of letting me know you're part of this community. Because at the end of the day, relationships aren't about tricks. They're about understanding people. They're about recognizing the quiet signals that reveal curiosity, warmth, and desire. And once you learn to see those signals clearly, something remarkable happens. You stop feeling uncertain about whether a moment matters. You begin to recognize when connection is quietly beginning. So the next time you notice a lingering touch, the next time you catch that soft, returning gaze, or the next time someone creates a small moment of privacy just for you, pause, pay attention, because those quiet whispers might be telling you something important. And now you know how to